Hey Woodhaven family, and welcome back to another week of the Journey 24/7 podcast. This is Chandler here with you again, and I'm so excited for us to continue in our study of Genesis today. If you remember on Friday, we finished up in Genesis chapter 40, where Joseph interpreted the two prisoners' dreams. Remember the chief baker, was hanged, as Joseph said would happen because of his dream, and the other, the cupbearer, was restored into his position. And Joseph just asked him to remember him when he was restored. But we saw at the very end of the chapter that the cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. Well, today we open up in chapter 41, and it's 2 whole years later, so another 2 years where Joseph was imprisoned. Now remember that he was raised to actually be in charge of that prison, so he did still have some authority in that, but he still was in prison. It wasn't a fun life. But we see here, 2 years later, Pharaoh has this dream. He can't really figure it out. It's this dream about cows, and he wakes up, then he falls back asleep, and he has a second dream. This time it's about grains, and it's just confusing to him. So Pharaoh is troubled by this, and it says that he called all the magicians of Egypt and all the wise men to come and interpret his dream for him. And it says that none of them were able to do so. So the chief cupbearer comes to him, and he says, "I remember my offenses today." He said, "When you were angry with your servants, put me and the chief baker in custody of the house of the captain of the guard." He said, "We had a dream. And on that night, there was a young Hebrew that was there with us, and he interpreted that dream for us. And it came about, and it was true." And so the cupbearer here finally remembers Joseph 2 years later. And it says that Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him out of the pit. And Joseph gets prepared to come see him, and Pharaoh says to him, "I have had a dream, and there is no one who can interpret it. I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it." But Joseph here doesn't make it about himself. No, he turns it to God. It says, "Joseph answered Pharaoh, 'It is not in me. God will give Pharaoh a favorable answer.'" So he again just points it always back to the Lord. Make sure that the Lord is glorified in it, that he himself is not the one that is glorified. Joseph is showing that model of what we should do. At all times, we should be highlighting and magnifying the Lord in all that we can. So Pharaoh tells Joseph what his dream was, and Joseph says, "Well, here's what it's telling you. For 7 years, you're going to have an abundance of crops in Egypt. There's going to be plenty. But then there's going to be 7 years of famine." So he's saying that there's going to be this time where there's just more than they could ever even imagine, more than they could use, more than they could ever need. But then there's going to be 7 years where there's pretty much nothing. It's just complete famine. And so his plan to Pharaoh is, during these first 7 years, store up, save a fifth of everything that we get. And in those last 7 years, we can ration that, we can use that to survive those 7 years. And so he does this, and Pharaoh then puts Joseph into power. As we see a common theme, when Joseph gets put somewhere, he rises up the ranks immediately. It's not even something that takes a long time. He was sold into slavery, and what does he do? Almost immediately rises up in Potiphar's house. Then he gets put in prison, and almost immediately rises up and is in charge of the prison. And now here, Pharaoh immediately raises him up. Now again, remember, this is not about Joseph. It's about the Lord putting Joseph in these places, and the Lord providing the avenues for him to be risen up into that place of power. But we see here that Joseph has reached the highest of his earthly power so far. Before this, he was over a house, a powerful man's house. Then he was over a prison. But now we're seeing that he's over all of Egypt to an extent. Just a few statements that Pharaoh says to Joseph that just show how powerful he's making him. He says in verse 40, "You shall be over my house, and all my people shall order themselves as you command. Only as regards the throne will I be greater than you." Then continuing in verse 41, "And Pharaoh said to Joseph, 'See, I have set you over all the land of Egypt.'" A little bit further down in verse 44, it says, "Moreover, Pharaoh said to Joseph, 'I am Pharaoh, and without your consent no one shall lift up hand or foot in all the land of Egypt.'" So Pharaoh here is essentially putting Joseph on the same level of himself in the power in the land of Egypt. And in the same time, Joseph gets married. We later see that he has 2 kids before the time of the famine comes. Well, when the time of famine comes, they've got enough saved up. They start being able to provide for all of the people that are coming to them. From all around, they're selling this stuff so that people are able to survive and to live. All because God put Joseph in this place. God interpreted this dream, and God set this plan in motion. You see, the Lord was sovereign in it all. It had nothing to do with Pharaoh. It had nothing to do with Joseph. It had nothing to do with anybody else. It was the Lord being sovereign. And what I hope we're understanding and seeing throughout this study across Genesis and as we go throughout the entire Bible is that this serves a greater purpose than even just the here and now in Egypt. Egypt here was able to have food and was able to survive in a time of famine, but that's not the main purpose of this. The main purpose is the Lord is constantly moving and is at work leading us to the Messiah. I would encourage you just to keep that in mind as we continue in our study. We'll finish up in Genesis in the next couple of weeks, and then of course we're going to hit into Matthew, but we'll be back in the Old Testament soon after that. Keep in mind that the Lord is just constantly moving. He's constantly at work, and when we look at everything that happens in Scripture, we know that He is sovereign over it all. Rest in that, trust in that, and just look for that, because it's so exciting when we start seeing these connections and realize that there's more to these stories, more to these narratives than just what's happening, but it's what it's leading to as well. And I am so excited for us to continue that study together tomorrow in Genesis chapter 42 as we see Joseph's brothers arrive to Egypt. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I can't wait to see you back here tomorrow.